Control's final DLC is here, officially connecting the worlds of Alan Wake and Control, with Jessie heading off into the closed-off section of the FBC called the Investigation Sector to see why Alan wanted her to respond to a distress signal, with the DLC confirming that Control is actually the novel Alan was writing at the end of The Writer called Return. First, let us establish what Alan Wake is. This was a cult among gamers. I especially loved the game. It was an adventure game with horror and supernatural themes that originally launched on the Xbox 360 as an exclusive. The game did not perform well until it came to PC. Many argued it was because it released as an Xbox 360 exclusive. However, it also released days before Red Dead Redemption from Rockstar Games. So that was an EA level of fail. Those who did play the game found it to be an exciting supernatural tale. Alan Wake was a world-famous writer suffering from writer's block after the end of his famous Alex Casey novels. To help him, Alan's wife Alice decided to take him on a vacation to Bright Falls, Washington, a small town away from everything. They rented a lounge on Cauldron Lake, and things seemed to be going well until they didn't. Unfortunately, in Alice's attempt to help Alan write again, she brought a typewriter, and when Alan stormed off, she was kidnapped by a supernatural force called the Dark Presence. This deadly force has incredible powers such as telekinesis, possession, and controlling the weather, to name a few. The downside of these incredible powers is that it cannot manifest these abilities without an artist to will them into existence, with Alan being the third artist that we know of that was used by the Dark Presence. The first was Thomas Zane, a world-renowned poet who used the power of the lake to revive his dead wife, only for the Dark Presence to take her form and attempt to control Thomas Zane. The second were musicians Odin and Thor Anderson, who succumbed to the Dark Presence after using the lake's water to create their moonshine, resulting in their visions. And the recent is Alan Wake, where the Dark Presence tried to use Alice as a bargaining chip to convince Alan to write by taking possession of him. Alan was finally freed thanks to Thomas Zane, who was written into the story by Alan, who was somewhat aware of what was going on. Alan breaks from the Dark Presence control, but must now live through the horror novel that he wrote called Departure, beginning his journey through Bright Falls in an attempt to save his wife from the Dark Presence. When I say everything he wrote comes true, I mean everything. You can collect pages that predict what will happen in the future. Even Alan is a character in the story and cannot deviate from the narrative. Heck, there was one incredible scene where an FBI agent named Nightingale attempts to defy fate by capturing Alan after locating a page and reading his death, only for it to happen. Talking about trying to fight fate and failing. I mean, technically he's still alive at the end of the game, but it seems that he's possessed by the Dark Presence. So why am I bringing all of this up and summarizing Alan Wake? Well, not only to drive interest and hopefully you purchase the game or play it on Xbox Game Pass because it is available there as well. It's a way to showcase how AWE starts to put a lot of red flags up and showcase that Control may just be a novel. Like I stated, this is the novel Return. Just listen to the opening scene to the DLC.
Good to see you, man.
Darkness engulfed the elevator. There was something there, reaching for her, trying to make her act. It was a distress call. Phaeton sensed a drowning man, a hunger in the dark. Investigation Sector.
Investigation Sector, huh?
Okay, a few things to talk about here. First, Alan mentions Jessie by name, someone he has never met. He also mentions a specific section of the FBC, an area he has never been to or has knowledge of. Yet he names them specifically and directs that message to Jessie, almost like what happened in Alan Wake when you located pages of Departure. In Alan Wake, despite being a world-famous artist, Alan was an ordinary guy, a random person with a tweed jacket facing a deadly supernatural force using everyday items like guns, a flashlight, and even a broken light switch infused with magical properties. All of this was made possible because of the Departure novel Alan wrote. It just seems so strange that a Sector's option would just appear in the elevator after Alan made note of it. Alan continues to do this throughout the DLC through these visions, not only providing context into what's happening, but direct quotes as well. The first time we see Hartman, he says,
"Baby, baby, baby, I feel."
And what does Alan write down?
Reality behind this reality, you must want these ways to drag you away. He said, baby, baby, spiel.
The second time we see Alan, it's most likely a past event, and we're just seeing a vision of what happened before American Nightmare, but after Alan Wake. He's talking to what appears to be Thomas Zane, but in Alan's body. Those who played Alan Wake know that the Dark Presence tries to manipulate its victims using various bodies of loved ones. And considering we have no idea what Zane looks like, as he's always shown to be in a diver suit and nothing outside from the shoebox containing his work is ever mentioned of him, or even an image of him is ever shown, Alan simply sees himself. It's also never really made clear if this is actually Zane or if he's still alive, as Alan is the one who wrote Zane to save him. However, this interaction is most likely before American Nightmare, since that's when Alan defeats Mr. Scratch, an evil twin twisted by the Dark Presence that takes over Alan's life after he heads into the world, but Alan defeats him at the end of American Nightmare. Time doesn't work the same way as it does in our reality. In fact, there is a helpful tip in AWE that confirms this.
Reminder, all employees are required to report their hours at the end of each month. The Federal Bureau of Control maintains that time is not subjective, and hours passed on alternative planes cannot be claimed. Astral dives do not accumulate overtime compensation. Thank you for your attention.
So this scene is likely a past action. The reason I'm making reference to this is because it's happened way before any of the events that are taking place in AWE ever happened. And the next manifestation of Alan confirms that he wrote about Hartman. After the events of Alan Wake, Emil was stripped of his medical license and his property was seized by the FBC. What's more interesting is that Alan provides a detailed look at Hartman despite never seeing what he has become. But most importantly, he talks about events within the FBC that he should absolutely have no knowledge about.
Escape. He was already out. He wanted to make it true. Wake needed a hero. A hero needed a crisis. For the part in the story about the government agency, Wake needed something special, something to convey an alien force mimicking human intelligence. Something that can't be translated. Wake channeled Burroughs and Bo.
Hopefully you made notice to what Alan just spoke about. The Hiss mimic human intelligence, and they're seen using human weapons and items combined with their own abilities. And they're technically aliens, as they do come from another dimension. The DLC ends with an alarm coming from Bright Falls, and guess who makes mention of that alarm? Alan, who just happens to predict this? No, it's because he wrote it into existence. What happened to Thomas Zane, Odin, and Thor, and Alan is happening again, with a new artist at the lake, and Alan most likely returning to the world to aid them. Now, there are a lot of holes into this theory, and I'm certain a lot of people will pick at it, but let me try and cover my bases. The first being that the Dark Presence is limited to Cauldron Lake and by extension Bright Falls. Alan was supposed to free the supernatural force, but was able to stop himself before that happened. However, as seen in the post-launch content for Alan Wake, The Signal, The Rider, and with American Nightmare, the Dark Presence effect can leak from its realm and even touch those who have been exposed to the Dark Presence. That's how Alice is still able to maintain contact with Alan, although it's kind of haunting of how she maintains contact with Alan, with him screaming and having all these incredibly dark episodes. The common counter-argument to this is that the power of Cauldron Lake is what made everything possible and cannot stretch beyond that. We see that the FBC has been part of the world for a very long time, and it's never established that the lake can completely rewrite history. It can make small changes or erase a person completely, but it cannot completely alter history without a logical course of events, which to create an entire situation where a government agency such as the FBC exists would take decades of work, since Alan would have to create events leading to its creation, the various altered objects that Jesse encounters, the people being hired, and so on. The artist can influence events, but they will need to follow a series of events in order to make it logical and establish them within the world. Jessie's actions from the start seem impossible. She just happens to find the FBC right when the Hiss took over after years of looking. When Alan wrote the Departure novel, he made it clear that he cannot manifest anything and had to be the result of certain actions. People had to die in Alan Wake, and close calls were necessary to create a believable set of events. Alan was no exception to this. Looking back on Control and what we learned from AWE, it becomes increasingly clear that Jesse is the star of the novel Return, shown at the end of the DLC of Alan Wake, the writer. Jesse and Polaris develop a bond right away after the slide projector incident, Jesse escaping but her brother getting captured. Jesse finds the FBC after searching for her brother for years and just becomes the director. Polaris saves Jesse from the hiss and Jesse destroys the slide projector, after which she happens to see the elevator button for the investigation sector after Alan appears, while gaining all these new powers and abilities, including one of the most powerful weapons, the service weapon. And as I mentioned before, Alan mentions Jesse by name and, most importantly, Polaris, something that Jesse kept secret from everyone. The power of the lake can stretch across the world, but in limited ways. We saw this with Thomas Zane, despite being a renowned poet, used the power of the lake to write himself out of existence, yet Jesse still knows who he is. And the only other person to know the existence was Alan, and to a degree Emil Hartman, who Alan was also writing about. It's too much of a coincidence that people Alan is writing about knows of the existence of Thomas Zane, despite him being written out of existence. The only way you would know of Thomas Zane's existence is by the shoebox containing his life's work, or the only remnants of his work. So why do this? Well, it's not only to return, but to have someone fight the dark presence. I mean, if you're going to fight a deadly supernatural force, having someone with godlike abilities is probably for the best. The biggest piece of evidence comes at the end of the Rider DLC for Alan Wake. Alan starts on a novel called Return at the end of the DLC, and what do we see at the end of AWE? Cauldron Lake is experiencing another altered world event, with Alan stating that things are in motion when an image what appears to be a staircase heading upwards, and you can see a watery texture up above. Alan wrote this novel to prepare for the dark presence, return to his world, and have someone ready to face it. Remember, Alan is not a warrior. He's just an ordinary guy, so what better way to fight a deadly supernatural force than someone who can match its power and have a benevolent force on their side? Jesse and the events of Control are actually the novel Return, and technically that makes Control Alan Wake 2.
Things set in motion. If the alarm's true, then so is the reason for the alarm. The effect must follow the cause. It's happening.